said about non-synchronized transmissions.
What's up, everybody? My name is Elliott, and today we are going to be traveling back in time, almost 85 years ago to 1936, when this baby was brand new on the showroom floors. In 1936, America was in the middle of a terrible depression. The economy was in the dumps, a lot of people were out of work, and many people were just keeping to themselves. Kind of sounds like what's going on right now. Anyway, if you were fortunate enough to be able to afford a new car in 1936, you wanted something reliable, easy to service, and something that could haul the whole family around. Retailing at about $625, or the equivalent of about $16,000 in today's money, this was a relatively inexpensive car that came equipped with a V8, something that no other manufacturers had at the time, at least in mass numbers, and it could comfortably haul a family of four around with no problems whatsoever. This is one of the best-selling cars of all time, and it was made right in the middle of one of the worst economic times in history. Beginning with the exterior styling of the car, this thing is unlike anything else you'd see on the road today. This thing is just gorgeous with its big, sweeping fender lines, little short windshield, big doors, and really unique hood and grille arrangement. It's just a sight to look at. The other thing that's amazing is it's about the size of an SUV, but this is what cars looked like at the time. You know, when you see a Civic, that's this. This was a car. Every car back then was a frame, and then they put the body on top of it and made doors the correct size. Space saving wasn't a thing. They were just making cars. And what you ended up with was something the size of an SUV. But that didn't exist at the time. This was just car. Under the hood here was the major selling point of this Ford. This is the 21 stud Flathead V8, and it's called that because it has 21 stud bolts holding the flat heads onto the motor. Now, it's called a flathead because the valves were actually in the block rather than in the head. Now, this V8 made about 85 horsepower, which is incredibly low by today's V8 standards. But at the time, it was a ton of horsepower, especially in such an economically priced car. Now, as far as breathing goes, it only has this single barrel carburetor. It's crazy that they would put this big of a motor choked down to this little of a carburetor, but that's what they did. And this was one of the most reliable engines ever. They put this motor in one form or another in cars up to the early 70s, which is just incredible. Ford was so proud of the new V8 that was offered in these cars that they even made it part of the hood ornament here. And I think this is one of the coolest automotive symbols to date. Now, I don't have any tattoos, but if I were going to get a tattoo, I think this would make a pretty sweet one. Now, you saw how that hood opened up on this side. What's really cool is that these cars had that same opening on both sides. So you can really open up this engine bay. This was back in an era when people worked on their own cars. Hard to believe, I know, but serviceability for the common person was a big selling factor. And this car is huge. I can reach on both sides of this car. The engine bay access is amazing. Not to mention, it looks really cool with both sides of the hood up. And if it overheats, as Fords tend to do, this helps really cool it off on a windy Kansas day. Now, this car was equipped with an electric starter. Pretty fancy. But if for some reason that electric starter malfunctioned, your lug removal tool also could be attached to the front, and you were able to hand crank this motor. Now, I'm not going to do it because this rotating assembly is really heavy, and I don't need to, but it's really cool to know that the option is there. And when do you ever see a car with a crank sticking out of the front anymore? It's pretty neat. Kids at car shows will see this and ask if the car is a wind-up car. It's hilarious. Moving on to the interior of the Ford, you're greeted with a pretty roomy cabin, basic instrumentation, and standard luxuries such as a little defroster, which looks like it defrosts approximately this much of the windshield, and a 3-speed transmission that allows this car to top out at 65, maybe 70 miles per hour with a strong tailwind. As far as heat goes, this exhaust manifold powered defroster was about your only option. But in the summer months, when it got too hot, That's where this thing shines. You've got a ton of options to let air in this cabin. The windows roll down. You've got a cowl air scoop, which is operated by this knob here. Now this will let cold air blow right into your feet. Cold. I mean, it's going to be kind of warm because it's blowing right over the engine. But it will let air into the cabin. And if it gets really hot, you can crank open the windshield itself, which is just awesome. These two things plus all of the windows open, and it is windier than a Kansas day inside the cabin. For not having air conditioning, it's really not that bad in here, as long as you're moving. When you're sitting still, it gets a little toasty. But anyway, another unique Ford thing of the era is this material that the doors and seats are coated in. It's called mohair, and it is just a really weird fabric. Now, Ford went with this because of its durability and all-weather capabilities. I mean, honestly, it's great. Look, it's held up this long. But I can tell you, as a person who's driven this in shorts, this is some prickly stuff. It feels like the spiky side of Velcro. It's incredibly uncomfortable, but durable and apparently cheap. And that's why Henry Ford went with it. I hope this comes out on camera. To get in the back is pretty unique. Look at this. Suicide doors. Tyler Hoover isn't the only person in Wichita who has a purple car with suicide doors. Now, in the back seat here, you're greeted with all sorts of luxuries, including a back seat handle that helps you get up out of it, and, get this, a dome light. Ford really cared about your comfort back in 1936. And for $625, you could live like a king back here. Look at all this legroom. I'm 5'11", 6 foot on a good day, and I have enough room to almost recline. Again, because this was a body-on-frame car, the floorboard is almost completely flat. So legroom and interior room is just great. That's why you're able to have these two long benches. In the back here, it's even kind of couch-like. It's got a built-in armrest. It's actually not a bad place to spend some time. Another cool interior feature is this window shade, which is all original, so that's why it looks like that. And you guys thought only BMWs, Audis, and Mercedes did that. Nope, Ford was doing it back in the 30s. And remember when I said this car could get pretty windy? Look at this. Both back windows open up too. It's amazing that the interior isn't filled with tumbleweeds, with how much air can get in back here. It's staggering. Anyway, let's keep going. Around the rear side of the car, there's a couple more unique 30s Ford coolness things. The gas cap is actually right here in a combination of being built into the fender and brake light. You've got a Continental spare tire kit right there. That would have been pretty fancy back in the day. And this trunk, when you prop the hinges up, when you drop something in this trunk, they used to call it dropping it in the well because, well, it's deep. If you need to get something out of this, I can't imagine if you were a shorter person and you needed to get something out of this, good luck. You're better off just putting it in the back seat. Now that you've seen all the cool little details about the Ford, let's get it out on the road and see how it does on modern pavement with modern traffic. Although everyone should be at home because we're under a stay-at-home order. So fingers crossed traffic is light because this thing is not very fast. And it's got a 3-speed non-synchronized transmission and mechanical brakes. And it goes without saying, no power steering. Let's see how it does. What I said about non-synchronized transmissions. Now we're coming up to a stop sign here, and this car is not equipped with turn signals. It is before that time, so I need to use hand signals as I cope with the mechanical brakes. You have to come to a complete stop, or else you will scratch it first. Here we go. All right. Feel that power. All 85 horses of it. Visibility is great because we're up pretty high. Again, this is about the same size as a modern SUV, so it's great. The door sills are high and the windows are kind of small and slitty, but overall visibility is just fantastic for such an old car, and considering the windshield is, no exaggeration, that big. Got it pretty torqued up and we're only doing about 35. And like I said earlier, it will do about 65-ish, but that's really pushing it, so I don't want to push it too hard. We just want to drive and cruise and see what it's like on modern, straight Kansas roads. In fact, this outlook here, minus a few of the buildings, is exactly what somebody would have seen during the Depression. Just kind of plain, straight road. Of course, this wouldn't have been paved, but this is this car's natural habitat. Now I need to get over, so I'm going to hand signal, check my infinite number of blind spots. It's not really working too hard. It's really an incredible machine considering the age of everything. I mean, 85 horsepower doesn't seem like a lot on paper, and it's not for a V8. But on these modern, smooth paved roads, it's enough to get you going the speed limit. It's not dangerous to drive. If you sit up, you can actually see the fenders, and you know exactly where the front wheels are, so it's a pretty easy car to place on the road. Of course, it's still a two-handed driver because the steering wheel is quite large, and there's no power steering, and because the tires are so narrow, they kind of find every crack in the road. But overall, in roads like this or a parade, not much traffic, it's a fine car. Now we need to turn, so I need to start slowing down. And again, these brakes are not assisted by anything. They are 100% mechanical. And I need to downshift into second, which requires a double clutch. Coming around the corner here, a lot of lean. But you can feel the power here. And we'll give it a quick 2-3. Oh yeah, that's power. You can kind of see why people would have used these engines for hot rods. They responded very well to modifications, and there's a ton of aftermarket parts for them. Now the instrumentation is pretty basic, but the temperature is perfect, oil pressure is good. I mean, this is a reliable car. This is a car that my dad and I have driven across the country multiple times in the Great Race, and that required the car to be factory original, and you know, it's quite the test of an automobile. And this car has done it, I believe, on 4 separate occasions. So for 85 years old, it's quite reliable. Look at that. Woo. Turning radius of a Miata. Now you can see here the throws in between shifts are not short, but considering this shifter is like 3 feet long, it actually doesn't feel that long either. It's just a unique driving experience, and totally heads up, it really makes you appreciate how far we've come with modern vehicles. Again, if I want a little bit more breeze here, I can pop this open, but for audio quality, I think I'm going to keep it closed. Alright, we're going to be making a left, so I'm using my 1930s turn signal. Really working the brake here. You can tell why people got tired of holding their arms out of the window. Alright, back on the road here. If I were buying a new car in the 30s, I'd be very happy with this purchase. First of all, I'd be thrilled that I could afford a new car in the middle of a depression.
but I think that I and my family would be very happy to have a 1936 Ford.
So there you have it, guys. The 1936 Ford would have been a great choice of a vehicle back in the Depression era, and it's a very cool collectible car now. As you can see, it drives fine on the street as long as you're okay with the mechanical brakes, no power steering, and double clutching your way through the gears, not to mention old-fashioned turn signals. This thing does fine. It keeps up with traffic, and you can get enough air in here to sandblast the arm hair off of your arms. This car didn't start out life special, much like a Honda Civic or Toyota Camry, but through the persistence of time, the fact that it's still around made it special. Anyway, that's going to do it for today. Once again, my name is Elliott. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already, and if you feel so led, like, comment, the rest of the YouTube stuff, and I will see you on the next video.